Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for joining our diagnostic training session today. And what you're about to see is a pre-recorded training session we did over in the United States. But be assured that a lot of the material that we cover is really applicable to any automotive application. So just be aware that yes, it is a lot of North American vehicles, but they will apply a lot of the same principles apply over in the UK as well. Now, if you do have any questions, if you're watching this during the premiere, you can just leave it in the chat. We'll be monitoring live chat. If you're watching this after the premiere, then just feel free to leave a comment underneath the video and we'll get to those as we can as well. So my name is Jason Gabrinas. I'm one of Snap-on's diagnostic technical trainers. I've been in the training department since 2013, traveling around North America, helping techs and shop owners get the most out of their diagnostic equipment. Before I did that, it was a couple years as a diagnostic sales rep at Snap-on, so I had 30 different franchisees I worked with, as well as the shops that they serviced, in order to help everyone get the most out of their diagnostic needs. Then before I did that, it was 8 years at Subaru. So I worked in a dealership, and over time, I guess, just became the default diag guy in the shop. So I always ended up having the drivability problems, the intermittent problems, the weird wiring problems that would show up on those cars. And that's really where I cut my diagnostic teeth, was trying to figure out all those weird head scratcher type cars that would come into my bed. Then before that, a bunch of other miscellaneous wrenching jobs. Been a little over 25 years under hood experience for me. So our topic today, we are continuing our OEM specific training series we started this year, and our OEM of the day is Nissan today. So we're going to talk about what's a little bit different about them, what maybe some diagnostic pitfalls you might run into, and so on and so forth. But first, we have to start with the history. All right, so the history of Nissan was actually founded a very long time ago, founded by Masujiro Hashimoto in 1914. They manufactured their first car, the DAT, in 1914 as well. There were multiple mergers and name changes throughout the 1920s, bringing us up until 1933, where they created their first Datsun, S-O-N, car in 1933. They later changed the name to Datsun, S-U-N, as sun in Japanese also means lost, so they didn't want to have it related to a negative thing, so they changed it to Datsun, S-U-N. In 1934, Nissan Motor Company was formed, so that was our first real iteration of where Nissan was on the scene. And they were also a major vehicle supplier to the U.S. during the Korean War. During the 50s and 60s, they expanded globally, so they have markets pretty much all over the world now. Established first U.S. manufacturing plant in 1980, so 44 years ago. First U.S. manufacturing plant. They continued selling cars under the Datsun brand until 84, 85. And I remember vividly, my mother had a Datsun wagon when we were growing up, when we were kids. And it was this disgusting pale yellow color with like forest green, dark green vinyl interior. So it was like the craziest color combination and everything. And I remember it was a stick shift too. One of the very few stick shift cars she owned in my life. So I just have vivid recollection of that car. Infiniti was launched in 1989, kind of as a spin-off their more luxury brand, right? And in 1999, they entered a partnership with Renault, which they're still into to this day. So one guy on the last stream was saying, "Oh yeah, they're owned by the French now, so it's more Renault than Nissan, according to him." But I'm sure they're still based in Japan. Nissan, it's a partnership, right? So that brings us to top models. What are the top selling Nissans that we've seen out there? So overwhelmingly so, it is the Rogue. And if you know, this is North America sales, right? So 2013 to 2023, the Nissan Rogue. And if you know anything about United States automobile sales in the last 10 years or so, a lot of SUVs, a lot of pickup trucks. So that's no surprise that the Rogue is on top. Then we have the Altima and the Sentra. And if we work our way further down the list, we have the only Infiniti to make the top 10. And that is the Q50 at 284,000 sales over that 10-year span. So we took some representatives out of here. So first one's a 2018 Rogue. And that was the high water mark for sales for the Rogue in that 10-year plan. So it is the second generation of the Rogue. It was offered with a 2-liter hybrid and a 2.5-liter naturally aspirated engine. The naturally aspirated engine would get a CVT transmission. Of course, the hybrid would have a hybrid type powertrain. Numerous ADAS features were standard on that year. So before that, maybe they're optional, but cameras and radars and other stuff fused together into what they call Pro Pilot Assist, which we're going to talk about a little bit later, was offered as an option that year. So that was the first year it was offered as an option, and all those ADAS sensors were standard. Another example is 2014 Ultima. So that's the top car on the list, and 2014 was the top sales year. 5th generation of the vehicle, 2.5 liter and 3.5 liter naturally aspirated engines and CVT transmission. This is also the first model year where no coupe was offered. Another thing that I'd like to mention here is that Nissan, it seems to me, more than most manufacturers, seems to only have like a couple different power plants, and they use them in everything, right? So the 2.5 liter was using the same one in the Rogue as the one in here. 3.5 liter engine, that'd be in a Murano or Maxima or this, they just use it across the board. Obviously, it's more efficient that way because they only have to carry or make a couple different engine types, right? But I just thought it seems like with them, it's more. Maybe it's because they don't have maybe as many models as like GM or something like that. But so if you can work on one 2.5 liter in an Altima, you can work on the 2.5 liter in the the SUV, right? So, and then I brought the Infinity in just for a little variety, right? So that's the second generation of the Infinity Q50. It was available with a 2 liter and the 3 liter turbo engines, actually. So that kind of gets me away from what I was talking about before. But I guess since they're kind of the premium brand of Nissan, they get fancier stuff. So they get a fancier turbocharged engines. I think the 3 liters twin turbo. And the 3.5 liter hybrid, which is that struck me as odd as well, because usually when you find the hybrid powertrain, it's the smaller of the engines, not the largest of the engines offered. And in this case, a 7-speed automatic transmission available. Some common issues with these. Now, talking to some people who worked there or worked there at some point in their careers and so on, they say really other than the CVT problems, which most people know about, not a lot of problems. They're fairly non-complex vehicles. I mean, yeah, the variable valve timing and stuff like that, but there's not a lot of bells and whistles going on. I mean, I had a 2023 Sentra as a rental car, and it still had that same 1.8 liter engine in it that they've been using for years with a 2-wire coil on top and everything, a coil on plug, right? So I guess if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But there's not a lot of high failure rates in that sort of thing. Not a lot of weird stuff, which is, I guess, a good thing. But obviously, a lot of transmission issues. Talks about it a lot. This is an example out of a TSB on a transmission. That's your CVT belt. So notice clearance issues and a scuffing. Intake system issues, which is going to show up on the next slide when we talk about common codes, because you're going to notice one thing as soon as we get there, and I probably won't have to call it out. And then EVAP issues, just like anybody else. They got a fair number of EVAP issues, just like any other manufacturer. So some common codes. And I think you'll see this is the top 10 codes on Nissan and Infinity based on our list of, we got like 3,600 codes from the scan tool that have shown up on vehicles. The first two are transmission related for the CVT, no surprise there. And then the rest of them, and you'll see it's mostly on Sentras, it's mostly on the 1.8 liter, but Sentra Murano, the 3.5, has the same problem as well. And then we'll see when we go and look at the Ultima, it'll have the same problem too. And it's that mass airflow circuit A Ranger Performance is the most common code on all of these vehicles, and more on these vehicles. And there is a TSB that I'm going to show you on it too, which was kind of wild when I first read it too, what the actual fix is. We'll get there in a minute. Let's talk about some OEM specific features. And like I said, not a lot of real bells and whistles on these things, but where it seems like they have focused their energy is going to be on ADAS technology. So they have two different types of Pro Pilot Assist that we mentioned earlier. So Pro Pilot Assist is a hands-on driver assist system that combines Nissan intelligent cruise control and steering assist technologies that includes a stop and hold function that can bring the vehicle to a full stop, hold it in place, and then can bring you back up to speed when the traffic starts moving again. And I thought that was interesting because other manufacturers aren't really, maybe they can do it, but they're not advertising it as such, right? I remember seeing tons of commercials still do on the Pro Pilot Assist stuff. So I had one as a rental, a few years ago, however long ago it was, and had this Pro Pilot Assist on there. And I was, well, let's try it out. I was going down like a state highway, right? So you got a long stretches of 55, 60 miles an hour, and then you have stoplights randomly when you get to a town or something like that. So I figured, well, let's try it, see how it works. So I went, kept a good distance from the car in front of me, or the distance that I told it I wanted from the car in front of me, and then we come to a stoplight. And as long as there was a car in front of me at the stoplight, it would stop right behind the car. And then as soon as that car would go, the vehicle would take off again. That's pretty slick how they did that. And now they have ProPilot Assist with Navilink, syncs with the navigation system, providing additional information to better predict the freeway ahead. New features include speed adjust by route that can help reduce your speed for tight curves and off ramps, as well as speed limit assist that gives drivers the option to quickly adjust the set speed to the posted speed limit. Both features allow for a more intuitive, enjoyable drive. So they're taking more and more technology and kind of fusing it together and getting us maybe kind of closer to those self-driving cars that we all want. That probably won't get in my lifetime, to be honest. But all right, let's talk tips from a tech. One of my favorite sections of this. This is where you get to find out all that weird, wild stuff that you might not have thought of unless you work for Nissan, right? So here's one that we get a lot of phone calls on. So this one's from me. This is when we get a lot of phone calls on at tech support, right? And they're saying, oh, the idle relearn doesn't work. The idle air volume learn doesn't work. So one important thing to note on tests like this, and it's the same on like the GM too. If you go outside of any of the parameters that it tells you on the screen during the test will fail because the vehicle's looking for a specific range of parameters. And if you're not there, and it's going to tell you in a couple slides here, it's actually going to say it from the manufacturer. If it even fails for just a moment, it will fail. So battery voltage more than 12.9, engine coolant temperature 70 to 100 degrees Celsius, transmission of park or neutral and manual. All electric loads off. That includes lights, headlights, radio, AC, defoggers, heaters, etc. Transmission needs to be warmed up. Drive vehicle for 10 minutes before running this procedure. I would say out of any of these failure points, it's probably this one or maybe the coolant temp that would get you. Because if you didn't drive the vehicle and you're just like, oh, I just replaced it, now I need to do an idle air volume learn, so no, you need to drive it for 10 minutes before running. So idle air volume learning is a function of the learning idle air volume that keeps the engine idle speed within a specific range. Must be performed under any of the following conditions. Each time the IAC valve, throttle body, or ECM is replaced, idle speed or ignition timing is out of specifications. You also need to do it when the throttle body is cleaned, and that is a procedure that needs to be done fairly often on these. Either replacing the throttle body or cleaning the throttle body is a pretty common repair on these as well. Need to do an accelerator pedal release position learning as well. So it's going to tell you to do all this stuff. Turn the ignition switch on, turn it off, turn it on, turn it off, 2 and 10 seconds. Accelerator pedal fully released. Once again, 9 seconds, not going to work. Same deal. Throttle valve closed position learning. It's going to do the same thing. It's going to tell you what you need to do and then confirm the operating sound of the throttle valve during 10 seconds. Before performing the idle air volume learn, make sure that all the following conditions are satisfied. Learning will be canceled if any of the following conditions are missed for even a moment. So once again, they're telling you again, need to do that. And it's telling you all the stuff that it told you before. Vehicle speed 0 miles an hour. Transmission warmed up. Drive for 10 minutes. Key on engine running. Idle not excessively high. All non-idle related codes cleared or repaired. You hit continue, and then it'll go and roll. So just be aware if it's something like that where you're having trouble and it's a multi-step test that you need to meet certain parameters, make sure you read and understand what the parameters are. Make sure the vehicle is within those parameters before you start, and then you'll have much greater success. And here's one we got from a viewer. So a couple weeks ago, they chimed in with a question or a comment. And they mentioned that they work for Nissan or used to work for Nissan. I said, hey, I got Nissan coming up. Would you care to share any stories that you might have? And I will tell you, he said, as far as Nissan goes, not a lot of real like electrical gremlins or anything kind of weird and off the wall. He said that there's a few little things, and this is one that he found that I thought was of great interest. But he said, by and large, they were pretty solid and didn't really need a lot of weird diagnostic, right? Like some manufacturers like these weird electrical gremlins or like these off the wall fixes for things that actually were. There actually is one that I found in a TSB. Like I said, we're going to see in a minute. It's not in this section, but so he worked for Nissan for a while, and then he went out, out of the OEM, but he worked for a fleet that had a ton of these NV200 vans. So they got a 2-liter engine in them, and they would have a persistent misfire on cylinder 3 a lot. And also they would complain about maybe some coolant loss or maybe some running hot or something like that. Didn't really think anything of it. They do the usual suspects. He said they had a really strict maintenance schedule. So anytime, because it was a fleet, so anytime it needed to get done, it just got done, right? So spark plugs wouldn't be an issue normally. They check the coils and all that. One time, a vehicle came in for a slight misfire and a complaint of overheating and coolant loss. So he said, well, first thing I'll do is I'll pull the plugs and I'll pressure test the coolant system, right? So 10 minutes goes by, nothing happens. So he goes off to the next bay and works on another vehicle, comes back 30 minutes later to hear water leaking into the cylinder. Put a scope in there or whatever, bore scope, and you take a look and say, oh, it's going into the cylinder from the cylinder head. The cylinder head was cracked. And after you find that, as most of the things in this type of fix or find are, after you find it, you'll find it a lot. And he said, yeah, he found it on other vehicles, and other people in the shop found it on other vehicles as well. So that might be something to look out for. If you got a persistent misfire that just won't go away under normal circumstances, do a pressure test on the coolant system, and maybe you'll find your answer. Let's talk some OEM specific scanner functions. Of course, we have the idle air volume learn we talked about before. Valve timing control learn. Read and write data to replace the ECU, which I thought was pretty nice. So if I ever have to replace the computer, I can just copy the data off the old one as long as I can communicate. And then I can paste that data back into the new module, and it's just, allows it to work. Transmission related test, there is a CVT fluid deterioration display and clear. So you need to clear it anytime you change the fluid, and then display it. And then if the value exceeds 210,000, fluid service is required. So it's gonna know, the computer will calculate it based on drive cycles and history of calculated load on the transmission. So that might be good to know if you have a CVT that has not blown up yet, and you need to do maintenance on it. Good way to keep an eye on whether or not that fluid needs to be changed. And then some other tests, we have a brake pad replacement mode, of course, like most cars nowadays. And ADAS radar static calibration is important. And that is important because some of them, like maybe the Muranos and things like that, that radar is right out in the open. I had a Murano one time for a rental, of course, and had a code for the radar because the radar was like right smack dab in the front, not behind the bumper like some vehicles, not behind the grill like some vehicles. It was just right there. Bottom opening underneath the bumper, just sitting there right out in the open. So that thing could get hit with a rock, could get hit with really anything, any debris on the road, and then you're gonna have to recalibrate it. If the unit isn't bad at isn't damaged or anything, it still might need to re-aim it, readjust, or recalibrate. So that one's kind of important for those, especially since they leave them right out in the open, which seems a little silly to me. But hey, I'm not an engineer, right? So what do I know? All right, let's go live on the tool and see what we can see. So first one we will pull is the Rogue. And we'll just pop in a scanner real quick. See a couple things. All right, so we'll go into engine. And one other thing with Nissan is there's a lot of variants. There's only 2 engine variants in this case, but like if you go to like body control modules and stuff, there's like 50 different variants. And the simulator doesn't know what one I want to look up. So you might see where I have to choose like protocols and stuff like that. That would not happen on a normal vehicle, on a real life vehicle connected to. But here we have idle air volume learn, right? Talked about that. Valve timing control learn, closed throttle position learn, self-learning, starter operation counter clear, save and write data on the ECU, bin registration. If I go back to transmission, right? And there's, 3 different transmission possibilities, and it's not that one. This one, It's not that one either. It must be this one. And then one of these, right? So that shows how many variants we have to worry about. Special function, right? So there's that CVT fluid deterioration display and clear, engine brake adjustment, electric oil pump air bleeding. I'd imagine you probably need to do that if you replace the pump in the transmission, maybe even when you do if it tells us right off the bat. No, it's not gonna work. Just gonna run the test. It'll just do an air bleed on the oil pump. So maybe you have to do it when you change the fluid. I'm not sure. All right. And then we'll go into sure track information. Based on our 2.7 billion repair orders, out of those 2.7 billion repair orders that we have, we've analyzed 344,725 repairs on 2018 Nissan Rogue with a 2.5 liter. That is by far the more common engine on these. So let's see what we got. Pads and rotors, that's probably pretty common. Wheel hub assembly, that seems a little high. Brake caliper slide pin, that seems a little high as well. Brake caliper there, number one symptom, noise heard from brakes. So there you go. Brakes vibrate when stopping. Sounds to me like they got some not that great brake parts on them. Let's see, brake discs and rotors, even on that top 10 over there. Number one, most common code, P0101, like we saw on that other chart there, right? So that is that's a very common code. 849 times that showed up on there. It's even on this list, top 10 list right there. And that's the list of, these are things that people have plugged into this box to search for manually. So like cabin air filter, that makes sense. I want to find out where it is. HVAC blower motor, transmission fluid for sure on the CVT. So we can see that, build a little understanding of what's actually going on with these cars. Right? Next one, let's go to the Ultima. And that's going to have a lot of the same stuff in there, just because they share, common architecture with the engines and stuff. That only has rear radars, right? Let's see. What else is it going to look at? Maybe it's not on this one. That might not be on this one. All right. So that is, so engine's going to have the same type of stuff. Transmission's going to have the same type of stuff because it shares the CVT, that sort of. Going sure track. Yes. All right, and then we'll see 314,000 repairs on this one, right? Same thing, pads, rotors, brake calipers, noise heard from brakes. Number one's the P0101 again. I'm going to click on that this time because I want to go into my TSB. So I told you there was a bullet on this. Multiple vehicles. I don't remember if it was on the Murano, but I know for sure it was on this. So any 13 to 16 Altima with a QR25DE, may even be other. It's got a P0101 code and there are no drivability issues. Step one, look at the PCV valve. If the PCV valve is orange, replace it. If it's black, don't. That's your fix. And then determine if the ECM needs to be programmed as well. So PCV valve. Let's take a look at the PCV valve right on top of the engines right there. Very easy to see. If it's orange, replace it. Don't know necessarily. I have a few guesses as to why that might happen, but I don't know why they just suspect all the orange ones have failed, right? So I don't know, but yeah, that's your solution: is replace the PCV valve with orange, and then flash it if it needs to be flashed. And if it's black and it needs to be flashed, flash it. All right, so. Interesting stuff. Interesting fix for a very common code on these. And then if we go to top repairs too, that pretty much plays out as well. So number 2 and number 3, right? Reprogram powertrain control module, replace positive crankcase ventilation valve. And then we see replace mass airflow sensor right there. That may be parts changers, right? Just go in, it's got mass airflow code, I'll just replace the mass airflow sensor. And then magically it might come back, right? So that'll bring you down to the PCV valve. And that's why it's important to check TSBs, my friends. That's why we want to check bulletins early and often, because it could be something as simple as that. So if I have a P0101 code in this car, and the first thing I do is look at that bulletin, and then all I got to do is pop the hood. It may already be popped already. I pop the hood and I look, oh, that's orange. Okay, simple as that. That's at least the first step I'm going to take, right? Maybe I do a couple other tests, but that's probably going to be the first place I'm going to go and see if it comes back, right? Simple as that. All right, and then last one, we're going to go to the Infinity. Now, the Infinity is a little more fancy, right? Like I said, it's their higher end make. So I'm just going to pop in here real quick. Go to engine. We'll see a lot of similarities in here, but you may find some extra bells and whistles as well. Oh yeah, one thing I also didn't mention on the Nissans that we talk about a lot with Toyota. I guess I didn't realize we had it on Nissan as well. So it has a built-in freeze frame. So if you go to the code, you can click on the little film strip, and it'll bring up the freeze frame data. Instead of having to go into generic functions or the generic side of the computer and pull up freeze frame that way, it actually pulls it up at the code. So that's helpful. We go to special functions. You see it's got more, right? Variable valve, electronic lifts, read and write information, target RPM, check the fuel lines, idle air volume learn still, accelerator pedal position sensor, starter operation counter clear, right? So we have a few more in here because they're a little more complicated. They're turbocharged. They got a few more bells and whistles. Transmission's probably going to be different. Like I said, there's a ton of different stuff in there, different variants. Active noise cancellation, so that's kind of interesting. They have that all the way back on a 2016. Suspension air levelizer. It's a fun way of calling that. All right, we'll go to SureTrack one more time. And this is going to be way fewer repair orders because they sold way fewer cars. So that means there's way fewer of them coming into shops. All right, so you see 15,667 repairs, which is by far the most popular engine. If I go, let me switch the engine to show you. So if I were to go to the 2-liter, for example, 2,028 repairs. So not nearly as popular. So we'll go back to the 3-liter. Wow, this thing's being weird. All right, 15,538 on that. It's 2 different 3-liters. But once again, pads and rotors, tire valve stem, engine oil pan. Holy cow. That's a lot of oil pans for that. That seems awfully high. maybe they're A, really low to the ground, or B, maybe they're just poor quality, maybe. Oil leaks from engine, number 2 symptom. Air conditioning and up, noise heard from brakes, number 1. Then we got there's that P0101 code down here, and that's down in the single digits, right? So evap is number 1 on this particular one. Cam position sensor, bank 1, fuel rail pressure too low, map sensor, right? So this is a little more varied on this one, just because, like I said, it's a different engine. It's not the not that 2.5-liter engine that we kept looking at. So yeah, just something to watch out for, right? So we can see. I like being able to look through this data. I think it's a good exercise, especially if you get a new car in, a new brand that you haven't worked on yet, or a different model you haven't worked on yet. You can just pop it in here and you can just take a look. Oh, well, what are the common problems with these? If I'm going to go buy a car, what's the more common problem? See all that. And remember, you get access to this with, if you're in North America anyways, with an up-to-date scan tool that's linked to your Snap-on account. That's all. So if your scan tool is current and it's in your Snap-on Cloud account, which it probably would be anyways, to use Snap-on Cloud, use security link and any of that, it has to be linked to it anyways. As long as it's in there, you use your same login from your Snap-on Cloud account. You go to ShopKey Pro, you log in with the same credentials, and you get access to this information anyway. None of this up here, but you'll get access to all this information down here. All that SureTrack information. It's pretty cool. All right. So that is Nissan. Hopefully you picked up a few little tidbits and tips and tricks on that. And with that, that is our time here today. So make sure you tune in for new diagnostic content every week. We will be premiering a new video every Wednesday at 7 p.m. UK time. So make sure you check it out on the YouTube channel. If you're watching, well, of course, you would be watching this on YouTube, but make sure you subscribe, thumbs up, ring the little notification bell so you know anytime we post new content. And it's youtube.com/SnapOnDiagnosticsUK. With that, time for questions. If you have any questions, just feel free. Once again, if you're watching this on a premiere, just leave it in the live chat and we'll answer those. Otherwise, leave a comment under the video and we will get to those as we monitor those comments as well. I'd like to thank you for taking a little bit of time out of your day to learning a little bit more about how you might be able to be more efficient at diagnosing vehicles using some of the information that we've given you today. Hopefully, we'll see you next week. Hopefully, you can watch and see you on any of our other videos. Have a good week, have a good night, and take care.